Courage, vision, resilience. It's more than just a journey. It's a universe of endless possibility, where a single idea can change a man's life, creating new worlds from the ground up. I am Ricky. I'm your guide through the epic stories of Web3 pioneers. Join me and enjoy the podcast. The Tales of Web3.
Today we got a very special guest, Jason, the co-founder of Star Protocol. Hi, Jason. How are you?
Hey, Ricky. It's an honor to be here. Really excited to get going.
Really excited to get you in as well. As I shared with you earlier, I think you are one of the very few guests that we don't really need to dive too much deep into your journey to Web3 because there's so many blogs, videos, tweets already dig you so deep already starting high school, right? I know these entrepreneurial journeys starting from like your ninth grade. You're the youngest PM at DeepMind, and then met SY at the accelerator, and right now building Story. So yeah, for those of you who wanted to learn more about Jason's background, feel free to go to these tweets, blogs, videos. But today we are gonna dive right into it. So Jason, what do you think is the superpower of you as a co-founder or as a founder?
Yeah, well, first of all, Ricky, I think you introduced me better than and more concisely than I ever have. So I'm gonna start describing myself using those 3 bullets. But appreciate you giving that quick background. So first question is, what I think my superpower as a founder is. I have a couple thoughts on this. Like maybe I'll answer the question directly, and then I'll answer like a meta question around that. So in terms of like what I'm uniquely good at, I think that throughout the course of being a founder, you actually quickly learn what you're not uniquely good at because you have to do a lot of things, and things that you thought maybe you were good at before, you realize there's actually so many people out there that are much, much better at what you do. So for me, finding this was more of a process of elimination, just realizing, looking around and seeing, okay, well, can I hire like a better product person? Can I hire someone who's 10 times better than me at marketing, who's 10 times better than me at writing and creating content, right? So for me, I would say like what's left is this ability to basically synthesize many different fields and the complexities around those fields into a simple vision. I think that's typically what I find myself doing very often, right? Because if you think about what Story's doing, it's straddling the world of IP, which has a lot to do with Hollywood, entertainment, and also just like copyright law, right? These are like very, very large, broad, complex fields where there are experts who have spent entire lifetimes studying and operating in these industries. And then you think about building a layer 1, building smart contract protocol, building an API and SDK. We're basically covering like years and years of web development on top of crypto native Web3 tech stack, right? So how do you combine those things? And then you have this, third thing in the triangle, which is building an ecosystem and helping apps and other founders find product market fit, right? So a lot of times you have to think as a founder, like, okay, what exactly am I building? Especially when there isn't an analogy to an existing business. Like we're not building a vertical SaaS business. We're not quite just
100%.
building like another general purpose layer 1. What's often really important for the company and for everyone else that I'm working with is to have a really, really strong North Star and a really strong mental model for how we're going to succeed. And that requires distilling a lot of complexity into, I would say, a few simple priorities, right? And that's what I found I'm really good at. And so I would say that's a superpower I have. Although when it comes to product or marketing or certainly engineering, like there's a million people that are better than me at all those things, and those are the people on the team, right? And I'll make another meta point around this, which is that I think that people probably overemphasize skill development and people probably think too much about what they're good at, what they're bad at. My take, maybe this is a hot take, right? Maybe we're jumping the gun, but I think that skill development is useless. And I think that thinking about your career in terms of skills is the wrong way to think about it. I think that the best people think in terms of goals, and they think about what they want to do and achieve. And it doesn't matter what skills it takes to get there. They just start going. they just start going after it, and implicitly through the process of succeeding, they will pick up the skills they need, right? So instead of thinking, okay, I need to start a business, let me read a bunch of Paul Graham essays, let me like go take this sort of online course on entrepreneurship, let me go to YC Startup School. They just think, okay, I want to build a business, that's my goal, and now I'm just going to do whatever it takes. And along the way, I might have to figure out, okay, how do I hire someone, right? But they're not thinking in terms of skill development. They're not thinking like, where am I today, and where, you know, like what are the skills I need? They're just
But
thinking where
vision,
I want to be
vision.
tomorrow, and just like whatever it takes to get there, they will develop those skills. So I actually don't think very much about what my skills are. I think very much about where I want to go and where a story needs to go, and I'll just do whatever it takes, whether it's hiring or doing it myself to get there.
I really like that. And then before asking you that question, I actually have like an idea myself, right? I have an answer for what kind of superpower you have as a founder. I feel like you are the person who can make a very complex problems into a very dense, straightforward thing that most of people, 99% of people can understand. And you are able to convince them that this thing is valuable, and then to let them to give the support they have to you. And I think that is the superpower. Probably similar to what
Thank
you
you.
shared.
Thank you.
Yeah, you are on stage, right? You talk about story, I think a couple months ago. There's a video, right? I forget, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. Like that is the first time I heard about story, right? And then you let me to know about the vision within that 15 minutes. Like I just fucking loved it. I think most people do. And also I heard like you're also good at writing, right? Condensing
That's
these
really the
points.
philosophy background. Yeah. And to be
Yeah,
honest,
I just I want to talk
mean,
about
yeah.
that too. Yeah, the
Yeah,
philosophy
sure.
side, right? You majored in philosophy, undergrad, right? What do you think is the biggest value studying philosophy brings you?
So I'll be honest, like I genuinely think that, well, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I know that I didn't study philosophy because it was useful. It's probably like one of the most useless degrees, right? Like I think that now, because of Peter Thiel, probably there have been a crop of founders and startup people who are doing philosophy because they think it'll be useful in entrepreneurship. And like, of course, everything you study is marginally useful in some way, right? Like if I studied geoengineering, I would probably like learn one or two things that would be useful for story, right? Like if I studied astrophysics, if I studied arts, like of course there'll probably be one or two things, right? So like you can study anything and say it's useful, but I will say like I study philosophy because I'm just super super interested in it. Like and to me, I didn't drop out because for me it was like I could start a company anytime, right? But I can only study for 4 years at Stanford and study one-on-one with some of the greatest philosophers alive in those 4 years. So to me that was like very precious, and I would say like quite different from the process of building a company. In fact, one of the only things I don't like about being a founder is like you have no time to read and you have no time to think about like philosophy, right? But I will say like if I had to extract what is applicable, I think that in crypto, especially in the earlier stages of the industry, a lot of people, like compared to any other tech industry and certainly any other industry in the world outside of tech, were philosophy and CS. And I think, you know, Chris Dixon was a philosophy and CS, like Vitalik basically had that background. A lot, if you dig around, like a lot more people have this unique intersection than you think, which is like very, very rare. And I think the reason why is because, you know, blockchain is so philosophically rich as a technology. From a political perspective, it's one of the only groundbreaking paradigm shifting technologies that came out of a very philosophical and political motivation, right? Of this, you know, in the wake of 2008, freeing the monetary system and this libertarian ethos. If you look at AI or VR, like, of course, now there's a lot of philosophy around it, but to be honest, it came out of a research lab. It came out of a big tech company with no political or philosophical implications, and only later did it get that sort of philosophical attachment when it became very big. Whereas in blockchain, that's always been the start. The philosophy leads the technology, right? Vitalik publishes his white paper in 2014, and then still 10 years later, you know, we're still building that.
We're
vision,
living on
right?
that.
So
Yes.
exactly. And so people in this industry, you have to lead with a philosophical vision and then build it into existence. And I think that's been helpful for story, as you said, in distilling like a set of complex ideas into almost like a manifesto, right? One that's analytical, one that's thoughtful, but also easy to understand and sort of like a compelling argument, right? So I kind of think of like you're building a company, you're sort of making an argument that is unpopular because, you know, if it were popular, it would already be built, right? Like Google is like an argument that has already been won, but like story is an argument that is we're still arguing for it, but we're not necessarily arguing for it just on Twitter or like writing blog posts. The most important argument that we're making is that we're going to reach product market fit, and we're going to prove to the market through the argument of building a company that that this is going to work.
I like it. Thanks a lot for sharing the philosophy behind. I really enjoyed it. The next question, I'm really curious about you and your co-founder, right? I think you guys have such a good match, different skill set. How do you decide SY is going to be your co-founder? And what is the experience like working with someone with, I would say, a lot more years of experience building in a startup? Because I know you started young, but I think he's a little bit older. And yeah, I just really wanted to hear more about like what's the perspective from you. What is your experience like?
Well, I mean, I feel like very lucky every day to be working with SY. So, I mean, it was a little bit of a no-brainer to work with him, to be honest, because, as you mentioned, we met at an accelerator. So it was actually the Alliance DAO accelerator that we met. And, we were working on separate things at the time. So we both had like a little bit of pre-seed funding, and he was working on, basically a sort of like a more DAO-like version of Story at the time. And then I was working on like other consumer, like sort of like exploring publishing and sort of like attribution on chain. So we were both like kind of hovering around this idea of building like an IP protocol, but not quite there yet for both of us. And then he, as you mentioned, he has sold a real like entertainment company in Web2 for $500 million. So he knew all the problems with traditional IP, and he knew how to build a business. But he didn't have like crypto is a very technical industry, right? So he didn't have any technical background. He didn't think like in a philosophical or protocol way, like because we're building a protocol. It's very different from building an app. You have to think very differently. And so that's what I had, and we had similar interests. So we started just talking and working more informally together. And then over time, it was like very obvious that like why aren't we working together, right? Because we have very complementary skill sets and shared vision. So that's how we got started. But what it's been like, I would say in the course of every company, the most important thing is not to be the best company in the world at every stage, at the seed stage, at the A stage, at the B stage. The most important thing is to survive to the next stage. So I call this like the cockroach theory, right? And some of our advisors have talked about it too. But the idea is like, you don't want to be like the best seed stage company and then crash out at the A level, right? Or crash out at the B level. Like all you need to do is survive. If you can survive from seed to A to B to seed to whatever IPO, and then you can survive from like being a 1 billion to 10 billion to 100 billion, then all of a sudden you're there. You're at $1 trillion business, right? NVIDIA is probably the best example of this. They took 30 years, right? And only in the 28th through 30th year did they become a $1 trillion company. And now they're the second most valuable company in the world. So they just survived, right? Like for the first 30 years of their existence, they were not even like top 10
They struggled.
Right?
Yes, they struggled a lot.
And so that struggle is important. And what I will say is like, as a founder, you had to not only think about what's the biggest upside possible and be the steward of the biggest possible vision, the most success case. You have to be also paranoid about what's going to go wrong. You have to think not just what's going to 10x the company, but also what's going to annihilate the company and 0x it. And so working with someone who's, a serial entrepreneur like SY, like you instantly fast track and skip the line, so to speak, of making like 5 terrible mistakes a year, right? Because he's already done it.
That's cool.
And so I think that's been one of the big benefits is like, a lot of things that Story has done well. It's just a matter of experience and the school of life that SY has. And he's also a very visionary leader as well. So I think he embodies like what a good entrepreneur can be. And like, certainly I've learned a lot from him. So for me, it's just like absorbing that. And also as a company, we've really benefited from his ability to, accelerate the vision, but also I think like less seen from the outside is the ability to not make fatal mistakes.
I see. I love asking like the co-founders these kind of questions and let them share more about insight for their partner, the other half. And I really liked it. I really liked how you addressed this. So what do you think is the biggest lesson, or I say like a wisdom, right, you learned in 2024? Because I feel like I actually agree with you, right? I feel like a lot of the skill set, no matter how good you are at BD, fundraising, growth, marketing, these are the skill set, right? I think like these are very easily to back out, right? I think the real valuable asset is how you perceive the world, right? Like the fundamental, how the world runs and operates. I feel like none of us can eventually get there, but we can approach there, right? We can approach the ultimate truth, probably like closer and closer. So what is something that you have like a very deep fundamental learning in 2024 that you like to share, that you think the audience will be benefited to?
I think it's maybe I can share a meta learning, which is that 2024 has been probably the busiest and most exciting year of my life, and I mean, hopefully every year is hopefully not like necessarily
It's
busy. I don't
getting
know how much
better.
busier you can get, but more exciting, right? More exciting. And I will say, like, one thing I really internalized is that, well, a couple sets of learnings. One is that I think a real benchmark for growth should be that in 6 months, every 6 months, like you can put a calendar invite if you want to, you should look back at the person you were at the beginning of those 6 months and some
Stupid.
feature. Yes, exactly. Some feature of that person that you were 6 months ago should feel alien to you, like as if it were another person. Like you don't want to even own that part of yourself, right? And that's, I think, the right rate of growth, right? Because if you're changing every 3 months, something's going wrong. Like you're having an identity crisis. If you're changing, I mean, I'm 20. Yeah, I'm younger, so like I think maybe once you're 30 or whatever, like maybe this is slower. But like I think in your 20s, as an ambitious person, like every 6 months, you have 26-month periods, right? Every 6 months, there should be some very big factor in your life, like probably your career. I should narrow down where you think, wow, like I actually can't believe I was doing this stuff 6 months ago.
This guy? Who is this guy?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be everything, but I think 6 months. And then I will say, like, another thing that I've realized is that, especially being a little bit younger, like it's really easy to always say, hey, the future is like, I will get better at XYZ in a year. Excuse me, I'm having a little bit of I will get better at XYZ in a year, or in 3 years I'll be like this person, because you look at like Brian Chesky, right, from Airbnb, and he's like whatever, he's older. So you think, well, I can't do that now, but I'll do that in 10 years. One thing that I've really internalized, excuse me, one thing that I've really internalized is basically you're already at your peak. And I actually wrote a little bit about this, but I genuinely think from a young person's perspective, it's very easy to hide in the excuse of improving in the future and use that as an excuse to not improve now. So one thing that I've really told myself,
I cannot agree more. This is what I hold very strong belief.
One thing I've really told myself is like, okay, look, if I look at someone or I look at myself and I think, wow, I could really improve at whatever skill, like let's say public speaking. I don't think I'll do it in 5 years. I think, okay, like pretend like you're at your peak now. Pretend like snapshot who you are today and just tell yourself, this is your peak. Are you satisfied? Don't make any excuses about time. And if you aren't, then just figure it out and get better, right? Like you can't tell yourself in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years. You just have to say, look, pretend like I'm at my peak now. The way I'm talking right now, this is the most articulate thing I could ever say. Am I happy with that? And of course the answer is no. And that means you need to get better today, right? And so that sort of thing allows you to evolve every 6 months by realizing that if you aren't the way you are, time isn't going to fix it, right? So you have to fix it yourself.
It's not. It's going to be today.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is really powerful. We're going to definitely make a separate clip for this and share it with the world. But like, I really agree that I actually share like exact same philosophy to people around me, my friends and family too. I think 22, probably I don't even think it's go to 30, probably 27 or 28. It's your really peak. If you want to make change, you fucking push out, you're out of the comfort zone. Do whatever you think can change. Right? Sometimes it's just really like a small trigger, and no more hiding. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I do think this is powerful. And the next question is my favorite question all time, a question that I asked all my guests, and also the essence of the Tales of Web3 podcast. Like, please share one of your most interesting, exciting, silly, risk-taking, full of twist, whatever kind of story on your way building story. That is something only Jason can do. And that kind of decisions, the stories, shapes who you are today. The stage is yours.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was thinking about this one. Honestly, there's just so many random things that have happened building this company. It's hard to pick one, but I would say like there's some moments where you find yourself doing something and you're like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like not in a bad way, but just in a absurd way. And it's sort of like you just got to do whatever it takes to get it done, right? And so I would think that honestly, I don't think I've shared this publicly, but anyways, now that it's done, like we raised our Series B. This was very successful. I mean, very, very lucky to have A16Z triple down. But it wasn't like, obviously, it wasn't like a straightforward process, as you can imagine. Like this, anything that you're like, impressed by is always going to be something that takes a lot of work on the back end. And for me, it was kind of unexpected where we had given an update to A16Z and to Chris, and I think that update went pretty well. And so actually, I think I don't know where SY was, but I was in London. I was actually giving like a talk at Oxford, and it was like it was like 7 or 8 p.m. Okay, and
That's cool.
I was like, well, maybe we should maybe there's something here. Maybe the excitement is, maybe we can parlay it into something and actually like raise the next round, right? And so before you know it, it's 8 p.m. in London. By 9 p.m., I have my flights booked to New York, but I need to be back in London actually so the morning. I can't even get my dates correct because there's so much international dates. But basically, like pretty much, I had a very important meeting in London with another investor. Like literally a breakfast. Okay, and so
Damn.
I was like, okay, so I basically had physically just the amount of time to go see Chris Dixon and A16Z in New York for about 45 minutes. That was like if I had booked my flights at the exact right time, if there were no delays, if there were no traffic on the way out of JFK, in New York, I could have a 45-minute meeting. And I was talking with this one. He's like, let's just do it. Like, why not? And so before I know it, I'm on a flight from London. Like, I was planning to sleep, right? I was on a flight from London to New York. I actually, like, because of the timing, like literally could have been no traffic. Like there's zero margin for error. I actually took one of those helicopter things. I'm not sure if you've ever seen those helicopters. I was like, okay, this is very expensive, but like, let's just do a helicopter. So before like within 8 hours, I was like, from that one call, I was on a helicopter and flying to New York. And so we had like, a good like 45-minute conversation with, the A16Z team. And that was kind of the beginning of what became like that round, right? And so that like, and then I took the helicopter back to JFK, flew back. And before you know it, I had to make my very important breakfast in London with my suitcase in hand. I got there straight from the airport, and I was like 5 minutes early. So that whole, like, I would say like 36, 48-hour process, I didn't get any sleep because I was preparing for like all these conversations. And it was just an insane thing. But I think because we did that and we just went out in person, I think that made a great impression. And that was, obviously not the only factor, but it was a very important part of the fundraising process. So it kind of goes to show that you need to have the mindset of I will do whatever it takes, right? And that has nothing to do with skill. Like it has nothing to do with skill to get on a flight.
Everyone
can get on a flight.
The vision.
Just go. Yeah.
Dude, I love that story. And that's exactly the kind of story that I would love to get out from amazing founders like you, right? Behind the scenes, the stuff that you never get a chance to share elsewhere before. So
yeah.
Thanks for that. And also I agree, right? Like I think the 1% of the time you're probably, as a founder, you're on a highlight, right? On a spotlight, you're sharing about the fundraising, but 99% of the time you're doing the dirty work, right? I wouldn't say dirty because it's definitely fun, exciting for you as well. But like a lot of things happening behind the scenes, right? It's the hard work, right? The big stuff.
And there is the dirty work. Like, I mean, I would say like the other story, which is less like crazy, but also like, what am I doing is, I for a time, now I don't do this all the time now, but whenever I was getting feedback on the first version of our like IP for GitHub app, I literally responded to over 400 or 500 DMs individually to get feedback.
Damn.
And I got blocked by Twitter twice. Like I got locked out of my Twitter account twice because they thought I was a bot. And actually I couldn't even complete all the DMs because I had to get my team to do it because I kept on getting banned. And I was worried that I was literally worried that I was going to lose my Twitter account because I was literally replying to every single person. So I think, there's a lot of stuff that you're not above. Like no one's above doing this, right? Like at the end of the day, you have to do it. And so I think that's also part of being a founder. And those stories basically say the same thing, which is like you have to have a sense of agency and accountability to yourself and your team that you just do whatever it takes. And it's not just like a Nike slogan or whatever. It's actually like you have to embody that to some degree.
Whatever it takes, you have to embody that. That's powerful. Yeah. I really like it. Okay. So we are heading to the last 2 questions for the podcast. I would love for you to share a hot, like the hotter the better, controversial hot takes that you get lately. It can be about IP, it can be about Web3 landscape, it can be about anything.
Okay, yeah. So I would say like hot take wise, I think I think one of them was I talked about a little bit earlier, which is like skill development is useless.
Yes.
Just get it done.
I really like
but
that
I
one.
would say like, yeah, and I had to credit that one to my friend Charlie Songhurst, who's a close advisor and investor. But he calls this idea fungible identity, which is like your identity should be fungible. Don't get attached to your identity as a great marketer, but not a good product person. Just screw your identity, right? Just do like your identity doesn't matter. If you want to succeed, your identity will evolve, right? Like whatever Jeff
Yes.
Bezos was doing in the early days of Amazon is 100% different from 10 years later, from 10 years later to now, right? So just screw your identity, right? Just make it fungible. So but I would say like on top of that, just about the industry, like one thing I think is really a maybe a controversial topic and can be taken the wrong way, but I don't mean it in a sort of malicious way. I just think like if you're a project and if your differentiation is community, then you don't really have a product. I not to say that community isn't important. Community is of course important. Like the biggest brands in the world are built on, to some degree, a sense of community.
It's like a
but no one
leverage,
is.
I feel like.
Yes, it's a leverage, but it's not the product. So
Yes.
Louis Vuitton, Balenciaga, like none of the. If you talk to the designers, they're not going to say, "Well, yeah, people love Balenciaga shoes because there's a great community." No, they don't care. they like Balenciaga shoes because they market it as high status because they use the best
Yeah.
materials in the world because they do marketing campaigns that get people excited, right? They have the right people and celebrities wearing Balenciaga. That's why they're special. So even for a fashion brand, community isn't a moat. So certainly for a technical product, like Airbnb has a community of people that really love Airbnb. Apple has a community of people who really love Apple. But none of those are the reasons why Apple or Airbnb are great. Those are the products of greatness. Community is a byproduct of a successful product. But I think in crypto, too often people believe that community is a product, and I don't agree with that. I think community is very valuable. Like I spend a lot of time talking to people in our community. We just launched an ambassadors program. Community is critical, but it is not the core product, and I will never let it replace the core product. It will always be something that is an important thing that enhances story and our vision and our mission. But it is not our product, and I think that too often, like in crypto, the community clouds the lack of product. It is a veil or like something that people hide behind when the product doesn't exist, right? So I think that's probably my hot take is like community is important, but it cannot replace actual PMF. It cannot replace real utility. And for the best brands, the best businesses, the best sports teams, what have you in the world that have great communities, they have it because their product is amazing.
That is a really hot one. I liked it a lot. I feel like community is the zeros, the product is the one. Like without the one, the zeros doesn't mean anything. But with a lot of the zeros behind, the brand, the product can be leveraged like 10x, 100x, thousands of hundreds of x more influential. So I agree. 100%.
I agree. And I don't mean to say community isn't important. I just think it needs to have product first, right? Otherwise, you're amplifying. What are you doing? Like you're amplifying like a tech product,
a mascot,
like just a logo. It's just like a tech logo. Like why would anyone have a community around a tech logo, right? So yeah.
Awesome. So before you go, the last question that I have for you is, please share more about Story. What are some very exciting updates on the roadmap and why people should absolutely tune in for that?
So a couple important updates. One is our last and final testnet Odyssey is going to be live next week. Or sorry, not next week. In the first week in November.
Nice.
First, second week in November. So early November, in a couple of weeks, we are going to be launching Odyssey. And internally, we're all, we have to kind of code freeze before that. So we actually are doing that this week. So internally, everyone's very busy and working very, very hard right now. So we have our final testnet, a lot of improvements on the staking side, a lot of improvements on the protocol side, just overall gas optimization, everything is going to be better. And there's going to be a lot more apps than are currently on Iliad, which is our current testnet. And so that's our last and final testnet coming out in early November. Very, very excited about that. And then mainnet will happen in Q1 of next year. So I don't think I've actually announced that publicly, but yeah, in Q1 of next year, we're going to ship our mainnet. So, from early November, Odyssey will run until sometime in Q1. It'll be a mainnet launch in Q1. So that's what we're all working towards.
Let's go. And also, like Jason said, they just launched a community ambassador program. So if you're interested,
that's right.
If you're a champion, go apply.
That's right.
Okay, awesome. And that is pretty much it for this episode. Thanks again, Jason, for joining us.
Of course. Thank you, Ricky. This was fun.
Dude, how you like it?
It was great. First of all, I really appreciate that you sent me the questions beforehand so I can think about it. And then also, I think the questions were very unique.
Thank you. I really, because I'm not technical, and I think there's too many podcasts that focus on the technical side of things, where there's a lot of non-technical folks that are more interested in like the founder's story, the background, so that they can learn more about